My name is Roger Seiders, president of Flexico Company. We're out here on Onion Creek in Driftwood, Texas. I've been building rods for 30 years because it's something I love to do. And I'd like to show you how to build a fishing rod. So let's go over to my workbench and get started. Okay, I've got some of my favorite fishing rods right here in front of me. The first step to building a fishing rod is to decide on what kind of fishing rod you want to build and design that fishing rod. And one of the easiest ways to design a fishing rod is to copy existing rods like this. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build this little ultralight. The reason for that is that it's easy to build and inexpensive. And if you can build this little rod, you can almost build any kind of rod. Alright, now I'd like to take a closer look at the rod we're going to copy and the components we're going to need to build it. We got the blank, everything to build the handle, the butt cap, the cork rings, and the reel seat, and we got the guides and the tip top. Okay, now we get to start having some fun now because we get to start working on the rod. And the first thing we're going to do is mark the spine of the rod. If you'll notice, I put a piece of tape on this rod above where the handle goes. We're going to have to leave that tape on here while we build the handle. And that is where we're going to mark the spine of the rod. Okay, what you do, you set the butt of the rod on a smooth, hard surface, and you bend the rod. You rotate it over, and it will jump into a pronounced curve. Okay, once you find that curve, there it is right there. Once you find that curve, you need to mark the inside of the curve. Okay, I marked the inside of the curve. Now, some rod builders call the inside of the curve the spine. Some rod builders call the outside of the curve. I like to look at it as where you put the guides in relation to the curve. On a spinning rod, the guides go on the bottom of the rod, and in most cases, you put your guide so the rod will bend easiest towards the fish. So, on a spinning rod, you'll put the guides on the inside of the curve because they go on the bottom. On a bait casting rod, you'll put the guides on the outside of the curve. Okay, now we're going to start assembling our handle. We've got our components to build our handle here, and here's the handle we're copying. I've got 4 cork rings to represent this 2-inch handle, and I want to ream them out to fit on this rod blank. This rod blank's only about 5/16 of an inch in diameter. The cork rings are a 1/2 inch thick and have a 1/4 inch hole, so it doesn't take much to ream them out. I've got a little small file here, rat tail file, and so I just need to take about a 1/16 of an inch off the inside of that cork ring. This is my favorite part of rod building, is building the handles. Okay, here's our last cork ring. On a small rod like this, the cork rings could be fairly tight because you haven't got much to clamp down on. But on a longer rod, you need to give yourself, make sure your cork rings slide into place pretty easy because when you clamp the cork rings, it's hard for the clamp to really clamp all the way down through, say, maybe 15 or 20 cork rings. Okay, now we have Ryan, who's going to be showing us some more advanced techniques on how we do it. He's got a reamer set up on our little cork lathe, and he's going to slide 4 cork rings on it at a time. This reamer basically has the same taper as the rod that he's going to install this handle onto. And later on in this video, we're going to show you how to make one of these reamers. He marks the length of the reel seat, leaves a space in there for that. He slides 4 cork rings on at a time. That helps him to keep them straight. Okay, while it's still turning, he slides his cork rings off. That makes them come off there real easy. Now I want you to notice how nicely these cork rings slide right onto his blank. That's important to get a good joint in between your cork rings when you glue it together. He slides his reel seat on. this foregrip. And that baby's ready to glue up. Okay, now it's time to glue up your rear grip. I've got paper towels for cleanup. I got a few tools, popsicle sticks and brushes. This is such a small handle, I'm going to use 5-minute epoxy. I got me a mixing board and a cork ring clamp. I've set my cork ring clamp where I don't have to do a lot of adjusting after I get my glue on it, because when you're working with 5-minute epoxy, you need to be ready to go because it doesn't take long. Okay, I don't have a whole lot to glue up, so I'm going to squirt out 2 pools about the size of a quarter. Okay, I take me a stir stick and I mix that up real good. Okay, after you get this glue mixed up, since we're using the 5-minute epoxy, you got to be able to move pretty fast. So I like to bring this first cork ring on from the butt. That way you don't get glue all over the back of the cork. Okay, you want a thin coat of epoxy around there. Okay, now we take our cork ring clamp, slide it in there, okay, you want to get it centered up best you can. Make sure it's straight. Okay, I'll bring those down, tighten them up a little bit. Make sure it's good and square. Looks good. Okay, now I want to tighten it up just a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Okay, because we used the 5-minute epoxy, this will be dry in about 5 minutes, and we can move on and install our rear seat and foregrip. Okay, now our rear grip is dry, and so I want to remove the clamp. Okay. The next thing we need to do is make bushings on the rod so that we can fill this gap between the rod blank and the rear seat. And we're going to do that with masking tape. I've got some real good, solid 3M brand masking tape. It's really a hard, solid masking tape. And I'm going to start out by making a mark on the rod that represents the length of the rear seat. Okay, now I want to start, I'm going to put 4 bushings on here. I'm going to jump out about 3/16 of an inch, and I start rolling the masking tape on there nice and tight. Try to get it on there almost as neat as it comes off the spool. Okay. I'm running my rear seat down and let's check and see how it fits. Boy, it's pretty good. That looks good. Slides on, it's got a little bit of tension there. That looks good. I've got one. Okay. Now I'm going to skip over about 3/8 of an inch to start my second bushing. By leaving those gaps in there, that gives you a place for the glue to run, to give you kind of a direct bind between the blank and the rear seat. Need a little more. I start up right where I left off there. That's good. I've got 2 real good bushings there. Now, I would like to switch over to Ryan, see how he does it while I do these other 2 bushings. Okay, Ryan's got him a little drill set up here. And he's got a variable speed foot control on this drill. He marks the length of his reel seat with a white China marker. And he does this so often that he can almost recognize the diameter of the bushings he needs to put on his rod blank. There needs to be a little friction there, but not too tight, not too loose. Skips over about 3/8 of an inch. He's going to install 4 bushings here. Later on in this video, we're going to show you how to build up underneath the reel seat with polyurethane reel seat arbors. This is only taking him a few seconds to do the whole thing. He's ready to glue that one up. Okay, I finished my 4 bushings for my reel seat, and I've got a good snug fit. Okay, I want to remove this tape that marked the front of my reel seat. Okay, I've already got my foregrip reamed out, 2 Cork rings there, and I've got my Cork ring clamp set where I don't have to do a lot of adjusting. I've got my tools handy, paper towels for cleanup. I've got my 2-hour epoxy. When you glue a reel seat and the foregrip together, you need to use this epoxy that dries a little slower so you'll have time to clean up your rod after you glue it together. We're ready to go. Okay, I'm going to mix up a little bit more epoxy this time. 2 pools side by side, about the size of a 50-cent piece. Okay, I got it mixed up good. Okay. I'm going to take my reel seat, hold it to the side. I'll go ahead and start installing putting some glue on this. And if you'll notice, I rotate this around so a whole lot of that glue doesn't drip off. Keep it rotating. Okay, now keep it rotating. Now while it's rotating, go ahead and slide your reel seat down. Okay, slide it down kind of slow and let that glue work into those grooves. Get as much glue into the grooves as you can. That'll really make for a strong bond. Hey, I've glued thousands of reel seats using this method and I've never had one fail. Okay. Okay, now, if you remember, we marked the inside of the curve, and so the guides on this little spinning rod and the reel seat need to line up with our marking on the spine. So I'm going to go ahead and line that up with our mark. Looks pretty good right there. Right there, okay. I got that lined up. Now we're ready to install the foregrip. So I put a little finish air on the rod blank. Okay. Okay, now I want to check again to make sure that my reel seat is lined up with my mark, which is the inside of the curve. So it will bend, this little spinning rod will bend easiest toward the fish. I got my Cork ring clamp all set. Okay, I go to a little trouble to get the butt end of that rod straight. Straighten this out. Okay, it's snug. Check it, see if it's straight. Looks good. That's looking pretty good. Looks tight. Okay, now I've got a little bit of glue that ran out around the edges right here. So at this point, I'm going to take my alcohol. That's just denatured alcohol, and I'll put a little bit in the cup. And I'll get over my cardboard right here, and I'll take and just wash this down where that glue ran out. Okay, that cleaned that up real nicely. I'll take a paper towel and just dry that off. Okay, now it's going to take about 2 hours to dry. Our next step is to shape our handle. This is the handle we're going to try to copy. And notice the butt cap takes up about 3/4 of an inch. That's what we're going to try to copy. Our handle is dry. It's been drying for over 2 hours. So now we can go ahead and shape it by hand. We're going to shape it with files and sandpaper. Now when we're shaping it by hand, we don't want to scratch up our reel seat and our rod blank, so we're going to take a little masking tape and we're going to protect this reel seat with a couple of layers real close to that side of the foregrip. 2 layers. Okay, then run a spiral down the reel seat 1 layer thick. When you get on this end, let's have 2 layers again. That way if your file hits it, it doesn't cut into your reel seat. Okay, we want to also protect the rod blank. You come with 2 layers right there close to the foregrip. Then run you a spiral out about 4 or 5 inches. Okay, now we've got our rod protected, and we're going to take our half-round file and we're going to start shaping this handle. Just start by cleaning it up. You know, you've got a little epoxy here. It's a little hard to cut through at first, but then it starts shaping up in a little while. Okay, all I'm doing is cleaning it off right now and trying to keep it as round as I can. I'm going to work on that foregrip just a little bit. Now you can see I've got quite a ways to go. That's the handle I'm trying to copy. I'm starting to taper that foregrip down just a little bit in front. Okay, that's starting to take on a little shape there. It's pretty nice. I'm going to go ahead and work on that rear grip just a little bit more. Okay, I've basically got it shaped up the way I want to right now with the file. I got my foregrip in a pretty good shape. I've still got to sand that foregrip. I've still got a little work to do. I've got my butt cap that I still have to put on this rod. This little area right here, this has to be shaped down. It's about maybe 1 inch in diameter right now. And I've got to cut that down to 3/4 of an inch, so I'm going to have to take off quite a bit there. And so the way I do that is I take and put a wrap of masking tape right at 3/4 of an inch. Because that butt cap is 3/4 of an inch deep and 3/4 of an inch in diameter. I put a couple of good, strong, tight wraps around that blank. It gives me a something, kind of a mark to work to. Okay, then I start cutting in there. I'm cutting in, but I'm not quite touching my tape yet. Okay, I'm finishing up here where so I can install my butt cap. I'm still doing all this with a file. My butt cap slides on really nice and easy. I still got it centered up real good. So I want to take this tape off here. And I want to put a little piece of tape over my butt cap because I don't want to scratch up my butt cap. Put a couple of layers over that so I can be rough, and then cover it up. Okay, I want to bring this, kind of taper this down to the butt cap. I'm going to leave a little cork there so I can sand it, do the last little bit with sandpaper. Okay, now I've pretty well got it how I want to with my file. I'm ready to move on to my sandpaper. I've got several different grits of sandpaper here. I got my 50 grit on my sanding block. I got some 100 and 150 and 220. I'm going to start shaping this up a little bit, sanding it. Okay, got my rear grip looking pretty good. Now I'm going to come back and just barely be gentle on this with this rough sandpaper. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and go on up to my 100 grit. I'm not going to put it on a sanding block. I'm just going to sand it just like, boy, it comes around in a hurry. Okay, this takes time to shape a handle like this. I could easily spend probably 30 minutes shaping a handle like this and really getting it how I like. But it's a lot of fun, and you know, you can make really a good custom handle, and you don't really have to take this till it's absolutely perfect. It has a little character when you do it by hand. And I want to show you another way that it can be done a little bit quicker. We've built up a drill bit with masking tape, and we shove that right into the butt end of that rod. That'll hold it securely. If you have a buddy, you don't have to have a lathe. We've done a lot of rods like this. We've got a drill that draws 5.4 amps and turns 2,500 RPMs. That's a nice, strong drill. 2,500 RPMs is important. We start out with 50 to 80 grit sandpaper, and we start getting our basic shape. Be careful on those edges when you round them over because they come off there in a hurry. If you mount a hacksaw blade on a piece of plywood, you can cut your sandpaper to any width you need. Now we got a 3/4 inch strip of sandpaper, and we're going to fit that butt cap onto that grip. We cut that down to 3/4 of an inch in diameter. Now we're going to finish it up. We're going to come in with 100 grit, then we're going to go 150 and 220. Then we'll take it to 300, and some rod builders take it to 6. 300 is pretty good. It doesn't do a whole lot of good to skip over your grits, you know. Kind of work your way through all the different grits, and because you need the 100 to get rid of the 50 grit scratches, and you need the 150 to get rid of the 100 grit scratches. You need the 220 to get rid of the marks made by the 150. Okay, I'm pretty satisfied with the way that looks. If I wanted to, I could spend a little bit more time maybe with some 300 grit sandpaper. But I'm pretty satisfied with the way that looks, done by hand. There it is now. Looks pretty good. Okay, I'm ready to take my tape off. Okay, we finished shaping our handle and it matches the rod that we're copying really well. The only thing we have left to do is to glue on this butt cap. I got my epoxy mixed up. I've already roughed up the inside of my butt cap. I want to go ahead and put some of this epoxy inside that butt cap. I put quite a bit inside. Cover the walls pretty good. Okay, I set that down. Now I want to put a very thin coat on the butt end of this rod. Okay. Now slide that butt cap on. Give it a good twist. All right. That's the finished handle. Okay, now that we've finished shaping our handle, it's time to install the tip top. And there are several different ways you can do this. I want to show you one simple way. I take my rod and lay it on the table like this, and then I take my tape and I put my reel seat straight up and down. Okay. Straight up and down with the top of the table. Okay, now I look down here, check it, and my reel seat's good and straight. So I've got to align this tip top that I'm getting ready to install. I've got to align that with my reel seat. Now I know my reel seat's straight up and down, so now I need to have a tip top that's not too tight and not too loose. Okay, the first thing I want to do is take an X-Acto knife and just scrape off a little bit of the finish off of that tip top, so that it is, you get a good strong bond. Okay, I have my tip top here ready. I want to have it real good and close. I got me a little propane lighter, and I take and I heat up my tip top adhesive. Okay, I want to take and put just a little bit of tip top adhesive out here on the end of that rod. Okay. Now, quickly, I would like to heat up my tip top. And notice the flame's not actually hitting the tip top. I get it hot. I slide it on. Now I know that my reel seat is straight up and down there. So all I got to do is put my tip top straight up and down. Okay? And just give it a 10 or 15 seconds and it'll be dry. Now I'll come back and take a little bit of that extra tip top adhesive and pull it off there. Okay, now cleaned it up just a little bit. Now that tip top is on there to stay. Shouldn't have a problem with that. Okay, now I've kind of looked at it and it's off just a little bit. I look down my reel seat, look down, and I want to adjust that tip top just a little bit to the right. So I take it and just heat it up real quick. Don't want to heat it up much because you can damage the end of that little graphite rod. Just do a little bit of adjustment. That looks pretty straight. So I think we got our tip top on straight. Okay, Ryan does this a little bit different. He makes these little strips of tip top adhesive by extruding it out onto a slick surface with a hot melt glue gun. And he will get these long spaghetti looking strips of tip top adhesive. And he'll peel those up off of the slick surface, and he has all kinds of diameters. He might even stick in a big tip top. He might even stick 2 or 3 pieces. This is absolutely my favorite way to glue on tip tops. It just really does go on nicely. Okay, now he wants his tip top to fit on there nicely, not too tight, not too loose. Cleans up that end of that rod, clean that finish off there. He'll break off a little bit of the tip top adhesive in there and heat up that tip top. Ryan always adds a little bit more at this point. He heats that up. You can see it boil over the edges just a little bit. Okay, he'll wipe a little bit on the end of his rod, and he slides that tip top on and works it back and forth a couple times, and then lines it up with his reel seat. Okay, it cools quickly. And then remove that excess glue. That's on there to stay. Okay, I'm ready to go here to prepare my guides for wrapping. I've got a little 25, 16, 12, 8, and 7. So these guides have to be prepared by filing the guide foot so that the thread can climb up from the rod up onto the guide foot smoothly. You take a little mill file, Ryan has a little sander with about 100 grit sandpaper on it, and he'll sit down and grind a couple hundred guides at a time. He was wearing a dust mask, which I think is a good idea for a lot of steps and rod building. Okay, our next step is to mark our guide spacing from our rod that we're copying to the rod that we're getting ready to wrap. So I take a piece of tape and tape that rod down to the table, and I line up the two little rods perfect. And I come in, and what I'm going to do is take a white China marker and mark a mark that lines up with the ring of the guide. Now this little white mark, I'm going to come back and remove it later. Okay, there I've got my guide spacing. Now Ryan has several boards that he has all the guide spaces for all the different rods that he makes laid out on the board. And he'll put that board into a jig that he has for marking his rods. This jig will hold up to 6 rods. And notice how he puts his reel seat straight up and down, and he pushes the rod into the jig all the way up against a bumper. Then he'll lay his marking guide down, and he'll put a mark on the rod that represents the rear foot of the guide, and that mark will stay on the rod and be covered up by that rear foot. If you look real close, you can see the marks that he put on there with that black felt pen. Okay, now I'm getting ready to tape the first guide onto the rod, and I'm going to try to get it taped on as lined up as straight as I can to the reel seat. So I'm going to take a little tape, and I'm going to put it across my rod again with that reel seat straight up and down. Next, I'm going to need some thinner strips of masking tape to tape these guides on, and I make those by putting a 3/4 inch wide piece of tape on a hard surface and slicing it up with a utility knife. Okay, now I'm ready to tape my guide onto the rod. And remember, I did my little white mark with my China marker to represent the guide ring. And I want to tape it pretty tight so it doesn't move around a lot. Now I got my reel seat straight up and down, so it makes it pretty easy for me to go down here and put this guide on the rod lined up with the reel seat. Okay, on this little rod, I'm going to tape a guide on one at a time as I go down the rod. And I'll wrap this guide next. But first, I'd like to show you how Ryan puts his guides on his rod. He has a jig that he slides the rod into. And he'll heat up the guide foot and use guide foot adhesive to put a thin layer of adhesive right on the base of that guide foot. Then he'll glue the guide onto the rod, and notice he covered up his little mark that he had on the rod, and that mark will be gone forever. You kind of have to learn how much to heat that guide foot up. If it's smoking, it's too hot. Okay, this glue serves a couple of purposes. It holds the guide on the rod prior to wrapping, and it also protects the rod after it's wrapped. Okay, I'd like Ryan to tell you exactly what he's seeing when he glues those on.
Okay, notice how I'm directly over, my line of sight is directly over the guide. You can see that the guide splits the blank in half and is lined up with the runner on the bottom of this board. So I have a direct line of sight down on top of the guide. I'm able to push it down and I can tell that guide is in the center.
Okay, now we're getting ready to wrap the guide on the rod by hand. I've got me a cup, and I'm going to put handy spool of thread and my tools. They're real handy. I'm going to start out and take this cup and set it on the ground there behind my chair. Then I take my thread and I run that spool right down to the cup. Then I take it and sit down right on that thread. Okay, now I'm ready to start wrapping this guide. I take the thread, I drape it over the top of the rod about an 1/8 inch away from the guide foot. I bring the thread over the rod one time, then I cross the thread over itself and turn it till it crosses itself again for the second time. Notice how I roll my finger down. Once it crosses itself for the second time, you can let go of it. Now, we want to go about another 5 turns. Okay. Now I take my clippers and I trim off this little leader right here. Okay, I want to save that piece of thread. I save it right here. I'm going to set my clippers right up here. I'm going to have my knife right here handy, and I continue wrapping. Okay, if you notice, I have a little angle right here on this thread. Now, because I file my guide feet, it's going to climb up on that guide foot real nice and easy, that transition from the blank to the guide foot. If you get a few little spaces in there, it doesn't hurt. Okay, right there I want to stop and remove my tape. Okay, I keep wrapping. We're wrapping with A-weight thread, so because of this ultralight rod, A-weight thread is good thread. Okay, when you get to be about a 1/16 of an inch from where you want to stop, you take this little piece of thread that you have and you run it opposite the guide. Just put a little loop under the thread. Okay, you're going to turn it about 6 or 7 more turns. Okay, then you take your clippers. Now I have put my finger here to keep it from coming unraveled. I pulled a little slack in there. Cut that off. Now I take this thread and run it through the loop. Okay, and then I grab this and pull it down. Okay, and once you pull that through, then you take and you pull a little gap in that thread. Take your X-Acto knife, you run it right down to that little crack, and push down on the knife. You don't saw, you just push down, and that clips off the thread. Okay, you take your clippers and take the handle, which is a real smooth burnishing tool, and you just barely rub that thread, and that pushes all your threads together. Once they push up close together, they won't come back apart. And get rid of all your little gaps. Okay, that's the way you wrap a guide on the rod by hand. I'd like to show you now how some other ways that you can wrap guides onto rods. Okay, we got Ryan here set up with a power rod wrapper, and he's using A-weight untreated thread. And notice how nicely the guides are ground so that the thread crawls up onto the guide foot real easy from the rod blank. He'll turn about 6 or 7 turns and trim off that little leader. He's got a variable speed foot control. He'll wrap right up to the base of the guide foot and stop about a 1/16 of an inch short. He'll slide a loop in opposite the guide. Then he'll hold his index finger on there to maintain tension and cut his thread and run that through the loop. Then he'll pull that through, and then he'll pull a little gap in the thread, and he'll cut that off. He doesn't slice the thread. And then he'll burnish the thread with a polished end of his clippers. Okay, your nylon thread is available through your rod component suppliers, and it's available in treated and untreated. Treated being the thread that doesn't need any kind of color preserver anytime. We use a lot of untreated thread without color preserver. We never use color preserver on the wrap that holds the guide down. This prevents the epoxy from soaking into the thread and makes for a weak finish. The thread is available in size A through EE, A being the smallest and EE being the largest. We use a lot of A, C, and D. The A-weight thread we use on most of our freshwater rods and some of our light saltwater, and we use C and D on our heavy saltwater rods. Okay, he's putting a couple of decorative tags on there. Those tags really don't serve any purpose other than decoration. And notice how he just gets that wrap started. He doesn't cut that leader off. He goes ahead and slips in a loop to tie it off with, and he continues wrapping. And then he'll tie that off. This takes a little skill, you know, practice this a few times. He's really got it looking good with that, with those tags on there. Great looking wrap. Okay, the next step before we apply the finish is to make sure that the guides are straight on the rod. And the way you do that is you take the rod and put it right in the center of your chest like that. Look down and make sure your reel seat is straight up and down. Then without moving the rod, you glance down your rod and make sure all the guides are straight up and down. And if you see anything that isn't straight, well, you just reach down and barely tweak it to one side or the other. It will move underneath that wrap. I call it tweaking the guides, barely move them and get them straight. That looks pretty good all the way down. Okay, we're ready to apply the finish. Okay, we've got our ultralight completely wrapped. We're ready to put the finish on. I've got it set up in some boxes with V's cut in it. And we've got us a loaded syringe kit ready to go here. We've got 2 loaded syringes, and first of all we check and see if these syringes have equal portions in them. Right now they both have 7 cc's each, and we're ready to measure equal portions. Okay, I like to put in the part B first, so I'm ready to go. I always dispense the part B first. I like to do that. And then I'll put the part A second. And in the wintertime, prior to mixing, I always warm my finish. That helps you in measuring equal portions. When we shot this video, it was plenty warm, so I didn't need to warm it up, and I don't do that in the summertime. Okay, if you don't learn anything else from this video, you need to watch this closely. You need to mix with a round, non-porous stir till this mixture turns crystal clear. It's going to get marbled, then cloudy, then marbled again, then crystal clear. Stir it till it turns absolutely crystal clear. Okay, I mixed it till it's totally clear. No more marble streaks. I got my finish all mixed up. Now that I've got everything coated, now I want to come back and I'm trying to put this finish on in one coat. So I let the finish soak into all the guides. Now I'll come back and take it down, maybe add some, little bit of a lengthwise brush stroke. But now I want to really even it out. And really kind of what you see is what you get at this point. If it's going to dry a little bit smoother, but the amount of finish you leave on there is what you're going to have on there. And these all look pretty good. I put a lot in the first place. I really when I come back I try to put a little bit more finish than I need on the first go down. That way it has something to draw from. It's soaking into the guides. Then I come back and kind of take off what I don't need. Okay, now that we have our finish applied, we have to rotate this rod to keep the finish from dripping off of it. And we have to rotate it for up to 2 hours. So that's one of the reasons that you ought to buy a finishing motor as your first tool for building rods. And I've got a finishing motor here, a little battery operated unit. I just touch it to that chuck, turn it on, it's ready to go. Okay, now I want to show you how Ryan does it at his finishing table. Okay, Ryan is measuring equal portions by just pouring it into a mixing cup. And you don't want to measure anything less than about 7.5 cc's. He's measuring 10 cc's when you use this technique, and you need to measure at least 7.5 to keep it accurate. But he's going to finish several rods, so he's going to need a lot of finish. And he's mixing up his primer coat right now. But if you'll notice, he poured the part B in first, then he pours the part A in second. And he will mix it up with a round, non-porous stir. And this takes a few minutes, but watch it real close and it will get marbled, cloudy. And you see more marble streaks will show back up as it gets clearer, starts clearing up. You mix it till it's completely clear. Now, he'll mix a few bubbles into it, but it won't hurt anything. But it's absolutely clear, all the marble streaks are gone. Now, to mix up his primer coat, he'll squirt in a little bit of acetone, and then he'll mix it again. You always mix your finish till it turns clear, then add your acetone for your primer coat. Then you mix it till it turns clear. Okay, then you pour it out onto aluminum foil. That will double your pot life over leaving it in the cup. Notice that little red tab he left on his plate, so that's where he grabs that plate all the time. Okay, he slides his rod into his chuck. That straightens it out with a little twist. Okay, now this primer coat kind of goes on like varnish because it's thin. And his finishing motor is spinning 200 RPMs, which is really nice for small rods. It's a little fast for big rods over, say, a 30-pound class rod. Okay, he has to apply enough finish to where he fills that little tube that's caused by the guide foot, the thread, and the blank right on each side of the guide foot. So that's something you've got to learn, as to how much to apply so that little tube is filled up. If you'll notice, he stops his rod every now and then. He's got a clutch on that finishing motor. Now, he won't spend but a couple of minutes putting this primer coat on. It goes on fast. Now he'll come back and make sure that there's plenty of finish to fill that little triangle, little tube beside each side of the guide foot. And once you've done this a few times, you pretty well know how much to put on there to fill that. Okay, he'll put that into his rod turner and let it rotate for a couple of hours. And he likes to let that dry overnight before he puts his final coat on. Now he's already mixed up his finish. He doesn't add acetone. It's always full strength for the second coat. And then he will apply enough finish to finish the rod. He usually always finishes all of his light rods in only 2 coats. He might use 3 coats on a saltwater rod, heavy saltwater rod. And kind of what you see is what you get. So you want to apply the finish where it totally covers it. It's going to level off a little bit more as you turn it on your drying machine. Okay, he will put it into his dryer and set it on about 3 hours. Okay, we finished our little ultralight and it looks really good. If you understand the steps to building this rod, you can build almost any kind of rod. A bait casting, spinning, fly rod, surf rod, any kind of rod you want to build. Now we get to go try this baby out. Another way to fill the space in between a reel seat and a blank is to use polyurethane reel seat arbors. And if they're a little bit too short in length, you can cut them in half on a bandsaw and glue them in from each end. We always use 5-minute epoxy to glue them up, to glue them in the reel seat. We made a little tool that kind of countersinks that arbor into the reel seat of 1/8 to 1/4 inch. You let your reel seat arbors dry, and then you ream them out to fit your blank. Don't forget to clean it up. I promised you earlier that we'd show you how to make one of these reamers like Ryan was using to ream out his car cranes. You need to build up a shaft and glue it in the end of the rod blank with epoxy so that you can chuck up the reamer in your lathe. You take a little flex coat reamer abrasive and some contact cement and an old rod blank that's broken on the end. Clean that rod blank up. Then you apply contact cement to the back side of that reamer abrasive and also to your rod blank. If you make about 3 or 4 reamers of different tapers, that pretty well covers all the jobs you need to do. After the contact cement dries to the touch, then you just wrap it on there in a spiral, leaving a little gap in between your spirals. And that spiral kind of works like a flue on a drill bit to remove material that you're reaming out. We tie off both ends of the reamer abrasive with thread and then saturate the thread with epoxy. That keeps the abrasive from coming unraveled. And we've made some of these reamers that have lasted us for years and reamed out thousands of grips on them. Now we've caught Ryan making a full wells handle on the Cork lathe for his fly rod. He's got about an 8-weight fly rod. He protects his reel seat, protects his blank with masking tape. The secret to this whole deal is that high-speed drill, 2,500 RPM, 5.4 amps. You know, like I said earlier, my favorite part of rod building is building these Cork handles. And it really is a lot of fun, and you can really make a nice custom handle that fits your hand. You can also shape EVA grips, EVA foam grips with this lathe also. Just like you shape Cork. Now he's going to make a fighting butt for this full wells handle and fly rod. He builds up a shaft with masking tape. Got an EVA disc glued onto his Cork rings, and the Cork rings are already reamed out to fit his rod blank. He's got a little trick where he cuts off the end of the EVA with a utility knife, because it doesn't sand off real good right on the very end. He finished with that little fighting butt. Slides it right onto his handle, and that's a really pretty full wells handle. Hey, here's a little demo on our little HW1 hand rod wrapper. This is really a nice little tool. Hope you enjoyed our video on how we do it, and hope you've learned a thing or two. You can see our catalog at flexcoat.com. So keep on smoking and joking and burning and turning.